Now it's time to talk about counters. We will discuss three basic counters. There are the CTR sub 5 variable counter, the CTRB sub 56 fixed counter, and the CTRC sub 55 variable counter. Counters, like the timers, are triggered by an action command. Every time that the ACT signal transitions high, it will increment the counter value by 1. Once the incremented value is equal to or greater than the preset value, the counter will turn on an output. The counters used in the Fanuc ladder are known as ring counters. This means that after the preset value has been reached and the output turns on, an additional action statement will result in the counter starting over again. Just like the TMR sub 3 timer, the CTR sub 5 counter can be set in the PMC maintenance page found under counters. You can change the preset and current values here for the sub 5 counters. As I mentioned before, be careful not to use the counter address. Only work with the counter numbers when making changes. This will really screw up your machine if you don't. Also, like timers, you can do an operation on the page that will allow you to search for a counter number. In addition, the switch button will switch you back and forth between the counter values and any description that the machine tool builder may have put in. Counters, like timers, are assigned a unique number that identifies the counter. There are a couple of additional settings that need to be made for a counter. These involve C&O, up, down, and reset input. Let's talk about these. The contact labeled C&O is used to establish where we start counting. Do we start at 0 or start at 1? If I'm counting something such as a turret location, I want to start at 1. If I wish to count the number of times a tool has been used, I would start at 0. If I set the C&O contact low, the counter starts at 0. If I set the C&O contact high, the counter starts at 1. This is typically set with a constant on or a constant off address. A setup such as this would produce an always on signal. I can then use the coil as a normally opened or a normally closed contact on C&O. A number of machine tool builders make use of a special address provided by Fanuc in the ladder for this purpose. This is the R9091 address. R9091 bit 0 is always off. R9091 bit 1 is always on. There are no coils for these contacts. Just as a side note, Fanuc has started to switch these addresses over to a new address. This is the Z address. R9091 bit 0 can be shown as Z91 bit 0, and R9091 bit 1 can be shown as Z91 bit 1. The next setting we're going to look at is the up-down input. This isn't overly complicated. Does the counter count up to the preset value and turn on an output? Or does it count down from the preset value and turn on the output? By setting up-down input low, the counter becomes an up counter. By setting it high, it becomes a down counter. This is usually handled in the same manner as a C&O input. A constant is typically assigned, although you can do almost anything you want in the ladder by simply changing some contacts. Now the last setting is the reset input. This is fairly simple. When this input goes high, even for one scan of the ladder, it will reset the counter back to the beginning so that it starts over. As an example, I can set this contact to F1.1. This is the reset signal from the CNC. When someone presses the reset button, it will activate this input and reset the counter. The next counter we're going to discuss is the fixed counter. All the settings on this counter behave just like the CTR counter. The difference is that the preset count value is hard-coded into the ladder. This is comparable to the difference between the variable timer TMR and the fixed timer TMRB. You can't change the value unless you edit the ladder. The last counter we're going to talk about today is the CTRC, the sub 55. This is similar to the TMRC timer. The preset value for this counter is assigned to an address instead of having a constant value. The value in this address is often set in the data tables. For instance, by setting a value of 12 in data address D302, the counter is set to 12. All of the settings are the same as we discussed previously. This is a simple explanation of some of the timers and counters used on a Fanuc control. Fanuc has an expanded PMC option that offers more functions. These will be covered at a later time. Now it's time for the labs. In these labs, you will start with identifying the inputs and outputs associated with timers and counters. You will next identify how timers and counters interact with each other. M-codes will be issued that will use timers and counters to generate alarms. Locate the resolution to the alarms.